which we'll be discussing later. So now, before moving on with this session, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos, and also leave a like if you enjoy our content. Now let's take a quick glance at the agenda. So we'll start off by understanding before cloud computing, that basically is what did the IT companies do before cloud computing, and then we look into after cloud computing, that is what cloud computing brought into the IT industry. And then we'll understand what is cloud computing, and once we do that, we'll be looking into the types of cloud computing service and deployment models. After that, we'll be looking into the basic facts on Microsoft Azure, that is what is Azure, why do we need Azure, and some more facts about Azure. Once that is done, we'll be looking into the various Azure services and learn about them. After we learn them, we'll be looking into various ways of accessing Microsoft Azure, and that will be showing you some hands-ons over there. And once that is done, we'll be looking into the career path on Azure, where we'll be discussing about various certifications and also job roles. And finally, we'll be looking into the Azure Interview Questions, and that would be the last part of this particular session. So now, without any further ado, let's begin with this session.
So here we go. So before cloud computing, we had the scalability issues, cost, server maintenance, and there is one more point, slow data recovery. This is no more. Okay, anyway, that I'll explain. Don't worry. So scalability with respect to the on-premises. So in any case, in a virtualized environment, can we address the scalability issues up to an extent? Yes, I told you. How it is possible? If you have high capacity servers available, then a virtual machine from a lower capacity server can be moved or live migrated onto a high capacity server. So when we do so, it is possible for us to uh, upscale the virtual machine to support a larger capacity requirement. But again, there is one condition here. I have to have a higher capacity physical server first of all. Only then I can go and move it or migrate it onto this high capacity VM, right? Into this high capacity physical server. So that problem still do exist, that I can move the virtual machine, that's fine, but I would need a high capacity physical server also in my data center. Okay. With respect to the cost, if you look at it now, even if you want to set up a virtualized infrastructure, there is a lot of cost that is involved. How there is a lot of cost involved? If you look at the licensing cost, the maintenance cost, the cost to buy the things, so that will include your obviously the capex. The capex expenditure will include the licensing expenditure. So you have to spend for the physical server, you have to pay for the licenses, you have to pay for any additional components that you need to set up your infrastructure, right? Virtualization suite of softwares, entirely you have to pay for that. So all these things comes together. Now again, still it is a huge cost itself. Then secondly or thirdly, you would need persons who can actually go out and manage this entire infrastructure, in which case you have to pay for them as well. So if it is a virtualized infrastructure, that's what you're going to create in your environment instead of a traditional IT environment. Now what is the difference? You would need some people who do have experience and knowledge on the virtualized infrastructure as well, right? So all these different considerations still comes up, and we are in a point wherein it's better than the on-premises traditional infrastructure, but this is again not a complete. There is a disaster, something that is hitting your data center. So the amount of money and manpower that you have to invest in getting those data back. Okay, so that could have been a problem on the on-premises infrastructure, but now in cloud we have good solution that is available for us to easily back up our data, protect our data, and make it available immediately in the event of a failure with respect to the primary location, that we will discuss as we go forward. Okay, so all these problems could have been addressed or is addressed when we move on to the cloud computing. That is what you see when you go to the next slide. You can see after cloud computing, all these things are actually addressed, right? So how exactly it is addressed, how the scalability part is addressed, how the cost is addressed, what about the server maintenance, the slow data recovery, how exactly all those different things are addressed. Okay, so with respect to the scalability, now what happens is that it is possible for us to do unlimited scale now, in the sense you can scale up your resources as much as you want. There are no restrictions as such, except certain things that we will explain as we go forward. But it is almost possible for you to scale as much as you want. With respect to the cost, there are no high upfront cost, in the sense capex is not there, capital expenditure is not there. With respect to the maintenance, now when you use managed services, there is something called as managed services from Azure. So if you use managed services, again the maintenance is drastically reduced on you. Now even if you don't use a managed service, even if you go with any other type of service, still the total management compared to your on premises is very much less with respect to the cloud computing infrastructure. Then with respect to the data recovery, making your data available in the event of a failure, I told you there are different technologies available with respect to cloud computing, which we will again discuss as we move forward. Okay, so with all these things, the cloud computing is going to address all the problem. But now obvious question comes, what is meant by this cloud computing? What exactly is this cloud computing? Okay, or how did we get into something, this term called as cloud computing from virtualization? What was the transition over there? What exactly took place? All these questions will be there in your mind. So let's try to answer that. What exactly is cloud computing? So there is a theoretical definition given over here. You can see that it says cloud computing is the delivery of computing services. What are these computing services? Such as servers, your storage, databases, networking, software, analytics, intelligence, and much more. Intelligence, IoT, AI, artificial intelligence, etc., and so on and so forth, over the internet to offer faster innovation, flexible resources, and economies of scale. Okay, faster innovation. There's a lot of the benefits that you get: flexible resources and economics of scale. What is this faster innovation? With respect to cloud, you always get the latest technology possible. In the sense, even if you take an example of the SQL platform or the SQL latest available stable versions are released first onto Azure. Only then it will come to individual customers. Okay, onto the on-premises and so on. First, it would become the latest stable engine of SQL will be available, for example, first of all in the cloud. So the same way, any new technology that comes as of today would be coming first onto the cloud only. Okay, that is the thing that is happening as of today, and that is why they say faster innovation. Okay, you can do faster innovations now with the help of the cloud. You can also understand it in a different way, so that now you don't have to set up an infrastructure. You can directly go and set up the infrastructure on the cloud. It is possible for you to set up large uh, infrastructures on the cloud easily, which will help you to innovate new things easily. So either way it can be understood. Secondly, flexible resources. What is meant by flexible resources? Flexible resources in the sense, whenever you create something in Azure, it is highly flexible. Whenever you want to delete it, you can delete it. If you want to retain it, you can retain it. Is it possible with your on-premises infrastructure? You created an infrastructure. Whenever you want it, can you just let it go? Not possible, because lakhs and lakhs or even crores of investment has been made on that. You cannot simply let it go. Okay, secondly, even if you wanted to sell it off, that physical servers, whatever the networking equipments and so on and so forth that you have, it is not easy to dispose. Okay, that is a huge problem. So the flexibility that you get in the cloud is that now there are no nothing is tied hardly. Anytime if you wanted to move away, it is possible for you. Anytime you feel like, okay, I don't want to continue with the cloud, it's absolutely possible. It's just a button's click, everything can be cleared out and we are done. Okay, and that is why I say flexible resources. You can also understand this in another way. Any resource that you have, you can flexibly, I mean, you can take it to one region, you can move to another region, or if you want to reduce the capacity, increase the capacity, all this can be done with respect to cloud computing environment. Thirdly, economies of scale. You can scale economically. What is the scaling? Scaling in the sense to support a large number of requests that is coming. If you wanted to have high capacity server, okay, or that is what we call as scaling, scaling your application onto a high capacity server. So whenever you want to do such a scaling, now economically you can do it. If it was on the on-premises, you would need to go out and buy a new physical server who can have or who can support the higher capacity. But instead of that in Azure, you can simply move on to a high capacity VM size easily. So obviously the question would be there in your mind, how it is possible in Azure you can move to a high capacity VM without buying a physical hardware. So all those questions will be answered when we talk about the Azure cloud computing. Right now, this is our introduction still. Okay, fair enough. Now, here again, another theoretical definition. Cloud computing is the use of various computing services on a pay-as-you-go model via the internet. So whenever you utilize something, you pay for it. There is a model that we are following with respect to the cloud. Okay, and what they're doing, they're making various computing services available to us over the internet. So making available over the internet, and that is why the term cloud came in, because the user feels as if his VM is sitting in the cloud, right? Because for him, it is coming from some place. Even he might not know exactly from where it is coming, but rather it is coming through the internet. So from that, that could be the reason why the term cloud computing came into the picture. It's as if it is coming from the cloud. Fair enough. So now we have to talk about types of cloud models. But before I get into the types of cloud models, first of all, let me talk about how exactly the cloud computing came into the picture. Okay, so we understood a couple of scenarios. We understood that the cloud will address a little bit of more issues that we had on the on-premises side, on the Hyper-V or any virtualized environment. We did discuss about what are the additional benefits that you get when you move onto the cloud computing environment. So now let's see how we moved on to cloud computing, or how companies started providing the cloud computing services. The thing is that companies like Microsoft, you know, they are MNC, multinational company. Amazon is an MNC. GCP or Google is also an MNC. So these companies, MNC, multinational companies, they already have presence across the world. They already have presence across the world, which means in many locations they already have offices. Okay, so now what they decided is that the companies like Amazon is the pioneer in this. So they thought like, anyway, we are having our resources on almost all these regions, all these locations, different locations across the world. We are maintaining data centers. We are anyway taking care of the data centers and anything that is associated with it. Right now, what we can do is we can go ahead and set up larger data center. I mean, whatever the capacity that we have, we can over provision it, in the sense we can increase the capacity of it. We can get additional physical servers and so on, any required additional components, all that we can get. Obviously they can do so because they do have money to invest. And now they say, okay, after that we can make it available for the public. We can make it available for the public. So infrastructure is ours. We will virtualize it completely. And once all that is done, we will open it up for the public, so that public can come and create virtual machines or any other services they can go and use from our data center. Okay, so they selected multiple locations across the world, and therein they created high capacity data centers. Eventually they created a portal wherein users can interact with their data centers and deploy resources in their data center. And that is how the cloud computing idea came in. Okay, so this was somewhere in 2006 or 2007 wherein Amazon started, and 2008 Microsoft announced Azure platform, and in 2010 they made the Azure platform publicly available for everybody. Okay, so this is how the cloud computing idea came in. So now that we have understood what exactly has driven us into the cloud computing environment, let's talk about what is the cloud model, service models and deployment models. So what are service models and deployment models? So we know this cloud computing, there are two types mainly. One is not two types, three types mainly. One is called as public cloud, another one is called as private cloud, and third one is called as hybrid cloud. Let's talk about first of all the deployment model. Okay, the cloud models are basically two. There is something called a service model, and then there is deployment model. What is the difference between service model and deployment model? Deployment model is nothing but how exactly the cloud is deployed. Okay, is it deployed as a public cloud, or is it deployed as a private cloud, individually owned cloud, or is it a mixture of both public and private? Okay, if it is a mix of both, I mean using both of it, making use of both, that is what we call as a hybrid cloud scenario. So these scenarios, what exactly are the differences between them with respect to the public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud? Let's try to understand that. Then after that, we will go to the service model. Service model in the sense, any service that is available in Azure. Okay, how exactly it is made available? There are three categories for that: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS, software as a service. Only when we explain those topics you will be able to relate things and try to understand, not right now. Let's talk about first of all deployment models, which is nothing but public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. So what exactly is public cloud? Let me take you back to the whiteboard. So with respect to the deployment models, the public cloud, private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. So what exactly is public cloud? Public cloud, from the name itself, we can easily make out. Public means a cloud service that has been made available to everybody. Okay, a cloud computing service that has been made available to everybody by an ISP, by a service provider. Okay, we know what is the difference or what exactly they do. It is possible for anybody, any individual or an organization to approach them and to create the resources. Okay, you sign up for their services, and once you have signed up, it is possible for you to go and consume their services, and that's what we call as public cloud, because it's available for the general public. Anybody can go and create the resources. Fair enough. Let's talk about private cloud. What is the difference with respect to private cloud? From the name itself, you can make out the difference. Private cloud in the sense, a privately owned cloud, a privately owned cloud computing environment. But again, for that, we will have to define what is this cloud computing environment. Okay, so if you have a highly virtualized infrastructure, when I say highly virtualized infrastructure, there are differences. A normally or just virtualized, or virtualization just enabled, or a completely virtualized, highly virtualized infrastructure, both are different. What is the difference? In a highly virtualized infrastructure, you will have certain software suites to manage them. What are the examples of the software suites? You have VMware vCenter suite or vSphere suite. You have what we call this OpenStack, which is from Linux. We have System Center suite by Microsoft. So these are some of the examples. So using the software suites, you can create a completely virtualized solution on your on-premises itself. Okay, the physical, you get a pool of physical servers, a pool of storage, everything you put together and then virtualize them highly. Then on top of that, you can go ahead and create as many VMs as you want. You can delete them, you can update them, move them, so then so on and so forth. All these things can be done. Such a infrastructure is what we call as a private cloud. The only difference is that that infrastructure will be used by your company only. You will never allow anybody from outside world to go and create any resources over there. Okay, basically a public cloud is also a highly virtualized infrastructure. Only difference they did is they opened it up for the public. But when we have on the on premises, we will highly virtualize it, and if you don't open it up for the public, then in that case that we can call as a private cloud environment. There is a difference between public cloud and private cloud. Then obviously, what would be it to say hybrid cloud? Hybrid is nothing but combination of private cloud and public cloud offering. So which are the scenario wherein you can have or you might want to use a hybrid cloud scenario? For example, you deploy one application on your on-premises private cloud infrastructure. On your private cloud on-premises infrastructure, you deploy some application. Now that application, as I have told you previously, is an e-commerce application. For example, you give a offer one random day, more number requests start coming. Okay, and the server where you're running this workload right now, they doesn't support because that's not having enough capacity. So you wanted to make sure you get a higher capacity available for you. So if you have a integration with the Azure cloud, now it would be possible for you to take that required capacity from the Azure cloud computing environment. You can either set up a new VM in Azure, or a couple of other possibilities also there. You can create multiple instances of the VM to support your application and so on and so forth. By doing so, you can make sure your resource does have enough capacity as required. So this is the difference that happens with respect to private cloud versus, sorry, private cloud with your public cloud, a combination of both. Such a scenario, when you use both, that is when we call them as a hybrid cloud computing scenario. Now we have to talk about the service model: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and then software as a service. What is the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and then SaaS? Okay, all of you would have heard about this IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Okay, so on premises compared with the three different service model that we were just saying. Three different service models are nothing but infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS. You can see that. Okay, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS. So before we get into or dive into this, let's try to bring this to our mind. All of you listen carefully. When you want to deploy an application, what is the first thing that you do? Let me know. You need a server, storage, okay, an environment where you can host this, and that is what we call as an infrastructure. So basically, if you want to create an application, if you want to host an application, you have to have an infrastructure wherein you're going to host it. And that infrastructure is nothing but a physical server. So what I'll do, I'll go and get a physical server. Having just a physical server is not enough, but rather I need its power supply, network connectivity, all the cooling facilities, and so on. And is that enough to host my application? Having a physical server and the power supply, network connectivity, is that enough? What is the next thing that I need to host my application? Right, you need to have an operating system. So first of all, you got the physical server. Now on that physical server, you need to have the operating system. Okay, what is the next thing that you need? The compiler or the apps, I mean the code you need. Okay, but for that code to get executed on your server, on that operating system, you need somebody who can host that particular code over there. We call it as web hosting softwares. Which are the web hosting softwares? They are nothing but Apache, IIS, Nginx, etc. So such a software is required wherein you can host your website. Okay, so that is what collectively called as middleware. So you need to have a middleware over there. Now on top of that, you can go and host your application, and that application can be made available to your users. Now let's think of it. On the on premises, who is providing you this entire things, whatever we said? Is it somebody else providing you, or you're making up yourself everything? Everything is ourself, right? I myself set up everything, in the sense the company itself, it is company XYZ. Company XYZ itself set up everything, whatever the infrastructure required: the network, the physical server, the connectivity, the storage if it is required, then the operating system, then on top of the operating system the middleware, then on top of that the applications and the data with respect to the application. Everything is done by me only. Okay, so this is what you can see on the screen on the left hand side. On the on premises, starting from the network, the storage required, the server, and now obviously we are talking about the virtualization. So the virtualization is also done by you. On top of that, the virtual machines are created by you. On the virtual machines, operating system is installed by you. Then on top of that, whatever the application you wanted to host is hosted or deployed by you yourself. So the entire thing, starting from very below stage to the top, you are doing, in which case we can say that is on premises infrastructure. Let's come to the next one, which is infrastructure as a service, wherein a cloud computing provider will provide their infrastructure to you. They will provide their infrastructure to you as a service. Their infrastructure means that infrastructure is already ready. You can go and deploy the resources over there. So what are the things that you can deploy? You can see here also again orange and blue color. The blue color says those things will be managed by that service provider, which means here you can see in infrastructure as a service, the networking, the storage, the server, the virtualization, the overall data center, inside that the networking, the storage, the physical server, on top of that virtualization, up to this will be done by the cloud computing provider. The cloud computing service provider, if it is Azure, they will be able to give you this much. Now, on top of that, you can go and create, for example, a virtual machine. You have the choice of creating the virtual machine. You can decide how much capacity and so on that you need for the VM. So that is why you can see operating system is coming under us. In the sense, virtualization, up to enabling virtualization on that physical hardware is taken care by the service provider. On top of that, creating VMs and installing operating system on it. Then on that operating system, setting up your middleware, then hosting your application plus data is all taken care by you. So what is the difference here when we moved on to infrastructure as a service? First of all, a infrastructure that has been made ready by the cloud computing provider is given to you. You are able to go and create the virtual machines over there with your operating system, whatever the operating system that you want. Now, the management overhead, is it reduced when we move on to infrastructure as a service as compared to on premises, or is it increased, or it is just the same? What do you think? Management overhead, in the sense overall management that you have to do on such a infrastructure, is it reduced when you move on to infrastructure as a service, or is it increased, or it just stays the same? Obviously the management overhead is reduced or it decreases. Why? Because now do you have to worry about those physical servers, the cabling that you have to do between them, that physical server maintenance, any problem with the physical server, do you have to run around to fix that? Nothing. All this will be taken care by the cloud computing service provider, right? So this is what we call as infrastructure as a service. They're giving you a readily available infrastructure so that you can go ahead and create virtual machines over there. On top of the VM, you can install the operating system. After that, you can host your application plus data with middleware and then use it. Okay, so that's clear, and I believe infrastructure as a service is clear now. Let's go ahead and see what happens with respect to PaaS, platform as a service. Now herein, they are not giving an infrastructure. See, let's think about the same scenario where I wanted to set up a SQL. Okay, I wanted to install SQL. So on the on-premises case, you will have the physical infrastructure get ready by yourself. On that physical infrastructure, one physical server you will select. On that physical server, you will install, for example, Windows Server 2016 operating system. Once it is installed, you will go and install the SQL also inside it, and you will start using it. Okay, so that is what happened with on-premises. When you moved out to infrastructure, now what you will do, you will sign up for the cloud, you will go ahead and create a virtual machine directly with desired operating system. Now into that operating system, you will go ahead and install the SQL and then use it. So that is what happened with infrastructure as a service. But there in infrastructure as a service, we can see that that virtual machine comes with an operating system. So that operating system patching, okay, maintenance of the VM, maintenance of the operating system, all you will have to take care. Now that also can be further reduced by going on to PaaS. With respect to PaaS, what happens is that therein you get SQL directly as a service from the cloud. SQL, you get it as a service directly from the cloud. You don't have to worry about setting up a VM for SQL and then having the required operating system and so on. And also, you don't have to worry about installing the required SQL, but rather Azure will take care of it. You directly go and say, okay, I want a SQL instance, then they will make it available for you readily. You can go and consume it. So this is what happens with platform as a service. Okay, directly, and also along with your platform as a service, another example, your app services. There is something called as app services. If you're using app services also is an example of a platform as a service, wherein you directly go and deploy the code on the Azure portal itself, and there is no operating system that you have to manage. There are no other things that you have to do over there. Okay.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of Azure by answering this question. Which of the following web applications can be deployed with Azure? A. ASP.NET, B. PHP, C. WCF, D. All of the above. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
What happens with SaaS? So now let's take an example of a emailing solution. So previously, if the companies wanted an emailing solution, for example, we know every company has their own emailing solution. For example, Shadil has shadil@simplycloud.in, one email ID. Just giving an example. So now this emailing solution for setting up, what we used to do is that we used to set up physical servers initially, long ago, physical servers, and on that we used to deploy Exchange. Then virtualization came in, we used to deploy VMs, and on that we used to deploy Exchange. Okay, so you deploy the Exchange, and with the help of the Exchange server, Microsoft Exchange server, that is where you can configure your email system, mailbox, and so on. There are open source solutions as well. I'm not denying that, but it is there. Just so that we're talking about Microsoft mainly, I gave the example of Exchange. Fair enough. So now, thirdly, when we further developed, now Microsoft, what they did, or the companies as such, such as Microsoft, what they did is that they made the software, or they made a solution available for us, and directly we can go and consume it. For example, O365, Office 365, if you look at it, Office 365 allows you to create mailboxes as much as you want without any problem. You don't have to set up a single server, you don't have to set up a single VM, you don't have to worry about any operating system, but directly they allows you to go and consume it. You just have to go to the O365 portal and do the configurations, and you are done. Okay, so everything, all the complete management, if it is taken care by the cloud computing provider, that is when we call it as a SaaS. Another example for SaaS, ERP applications are, for example, SaaS, or let's say the OneDrive applications that you have in your mobile phone, or the Google Drive, etc., are also examples of the SaaS solution. What is Microsoft Azure? What exactly is Microsoft Azure? We already know Microsoft Azure is a cloud service provider owned by Microsoft. It provides various web scale cloud services such as compute, storage, networking, etc. We know. So Azure is nothing but a cloud service provider. We already know that, a public cloud service provider owned by Microsoft. It was launched on 1st of February, that's in 2010. And it's one of the widely recognized cloud computing service provider. More than 90% of this Fortune 500 companies, okay, some of the top 500 companies, 90% of them make use of the Azure cloud. In either one or the other way, they use the cloud services, Azure cloud services. It is one of the highly cost-effective platform that you have is Azure, and there are multiple languages supported. Okay, with respect to applications and so on, multiple languages are supported. Then there is the availability zone concept. Okay, first of all, let's try to understand the geographic structure of Azure. How exactly do they operate? Let me open up one of the region diagram of Azure. This is how the world map, we know that. And now herein, you can see, for example, there are so many blue dots that you see. If you look at the left hand side, bottom's left hand side, there you will see what are meant by those markings. Whatever those markings that you see, what is meant by them. You can see there, first of all, there is a normal blue circle, and that means it's an available region. I'll talk about each of them, but first of all, please understand what exactly the term says, available region. A dotted circle says it's a announced region. Then a blue circle, inside that a white diamond kind of symbol that says availability zones are available. Blue circle inside that dotted circle, again announced availability zones. And finally dotted circle inside that, again dotted circle, or it's not a dotted circle inside that another circle, it's announced region with availability zone. Okay, what are the differences? What exactly is meant by that? So first of all, with respect to the topology of Azure, the very first term that you have to understand is nothing but a geopolitical area, okay, or a larger geographical area. So this geopolitical boundary, which are they? For example, India is considered as one geopolitical boundary, and Australia is considered as another one geopolitical boundary. Africa is another one. Then there is Middle East. Then there is your Europe, North America, and South America. Each of them are identified to be separate geopolitical boundaries. So you can see within a larger area, you can either say a larger geographical area or you can say geopolitical boundary. Either way, it's fine to use. So in this larger area, now you can see there are so many different regions available. If you look at the India region itself, that is somewhere over here, you can see that. Okay. So if you look at the India region itself, India geopolitical area itself, you can see there are three different regions: West India, South India, and then Central India. Okay. So again, repeating, you have a larger geographical area. Inside that larger geographical area, you have multiple regions. As an example, if you take India geographical area, there is South India, Central India, and West India. So two terms now: a larger geographical area, a region. Now what do you have inside this region? The region contains something called as data centers. Okay, in the sense, a region is nothing but a physical location from where Azure is operating from. So you can see I told you in India case there are three regions. So one is, for example, South India. So South India, the location is actually Chennai. Okay, Chennai is the location for South India. Central India, that's nothing but Pune, and West India is nothing but Mumbai. Okay, so this is what you have with respect to the location of their region. So now these regions always are created by keeping some considerations in mind. In the sense, between two regions, at least 300 miles of difference has to be there. Okay, 300 miles bare minimum travel distance should be there between the two regions. So if you take the South India region, and if you look at the West India region, between them obviously it's more than 300 miles. Okay, so the same way between Mumbai and Pune also it would be more than 300 miles that we have. So in that way the regions are selected. It's not only in India but in every location. That is the idea how they create the regions. So now what do you have inside the region? Inside the region now you have something called as data center. Data center in the sense, region I told you that's a geographical area. In that geographical area now you will have the buildings. Okay, that buildings is what I'm referring to by data center. So inside this data center what you have so many networking equipments. Then you have your storage equipments, you have your physical servers with respect to running the VMs and so on. I told you need the physical servers. So this physical servers, storage devices, the networking equipment, so on and so forth, everything put together that will be available with inside it. Okay, so again coming back to the hierarchy, first of all you have a larger geographical area, you have regions, you have data centers, then you have server racks, then inside the server rack you have the servers. So this is a hierarchy. This is how the resources are kept in the Azure data center or in a given region. Now where does the availability zone concept comes in? So in between we have to insert something called as availability zone. To understand that, let me take you back to the whiteboard. So what is availability zone? We will say also AV zone. AV zone. So what does it mean? So I told you have one region. Okay, so for example this is the South India region. Oops, this is the South India region. So inside the South India region, now I told you will be having data center. Okay, let's say there were three different data center buildings available. So there is one data center building, another data center building, another data center building, three different data center building. Okay, now if Microsoft is able to provide all these three with different power supply, cooling facility, network connectivity, then in that case we can say they becomes zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So which means here this guy will have his own power facility, his own network facility, for example, and the same is applicable for the second region also, second data center also. and the same thing happens for the third data center also. But that doesn't mean they will not have connectivity between them. They will have a network connectivity between them for sure. Okay, so now what is the idea over here, or why exactly it is needed? Okay, first of all, when you have a scenario as this is what we call as availability zone. So when Microsoft has provided each data centers with separate power supply, cooling facility, and so on, then in that case we can say they are availability zones now. Okay, so this is one of the high availability concept. For example, if one data center goes, you should have the resources still available in the second or third data center. That is the idea of having availability zone. Okay, we'll talk about that protection, how you can provide protection for the VM, the storage, and so on. So therein I'll elaborate on the availability zone. For now, you can understand inside a given region like South India, if they say it is supported, that means therein you will have bare minimum 3 different data center buildings, and they will be called as zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3 respectively. Okay, each of them becomes separate zones. What is the specialty of the zone? Each zone will have its own power facility, cooling facility, and so on. Okay, so this is the idea that we have with respect to the architecture of Azure infrastructure. Larger geographic area, then there are regions, availability zone, data center, server racks inside data centers, physical servers, and any other components, equipments that is required for the smooth functioning of it. Fair enough. Now let's come back over here, and we did see there are so many regions. Approximately how many regions are there? Azure is currently operating from 56 regions across the world, and this is one of the highest number with respect to any other cloud computing service provider. No other cloud computing service provider does have this many number of regions available. Only Azure has this many regions available. Okay, so that the customers can make a good choice as to where we want to deploy the resources. Fair enough, and it's still increasing. And now there in itself, some regions do support this availability zone, some regions does not support availability zone. Okay, and we know the difference between what exactly is availability zone is doing and what non-availability zone is doing. So now that we can see there are so many regions, 56 regions, and increasing. Now in that region itself, some supports availability zone, some doesn't support. Some are just announced region which they are creating. As of now, the creation process is not completed, etc. Okay, so this is what we have, and the services are available across 140 countries. Okay, with respect to Azure, I'm talking about. So Microsoft Azure services. So here we talk about the different services offered by Microsoft: networking, storage, and database, plus identity also. These are some of the services provided by Microsoft Azure. You can create virtual machine in Azure. You can do the networking between them. You can do the storage and much more. This is just an example. So in each category, now in each compute, networking, storage, database, they have elaborated certain services just to introduce you onto those services. So we'll just quickly have a look at them. In detail discussion is following anyway, so we'll not spend time over here right now just to give you some basic of it, but rather we'll just show you, okay, these are the service that is coming under compute, this is what coming under networking, and then we'll move on. So let me take you to the appropriate, yeah, here we go. First of all, Azure services compute, we can see virtual machine, function app, app service, Kubernetes service, all are coming under the compute category. Apart from that, you have networking. So with respect to the networking, the services that is available for us is virtual network, load balancers, application gateway, DNS zone, and CDN profiles. CDN we haven't talked about, that we will discuss. Okay, so those things, just a second. Yeah, so that's what we have with respect to the second. Now in the third category, you can see Azure services with respect to the storage. You have blob storage, file, table, queue, data lake, and data box storage, different options. And apart from that, what else we have with respect to database, I believe? Let me see. Yes, with respect to the database offerings available from Azure is nothing but SQL database is available, Cosmos DB is available, Data Factory is available, Data Lake Analytics also somewhat would be available. Okay, so Data Lake Analytics, why is it somewhat that is not included in 104, and that's why I said it so. In 104, we'll not talk about the Data Lake Analytics, also the Data Factory. SQL and Cosmos will discuss only in 300 series. Okay, the highest paper. Fair enough. So apart from this, so that was some of the what we call ways with which. Okay, so next let's talk about ways of accessing Microsoft Azure. So now that you have a Microsoft Azure account, you should know how you can interact with the Microsoft Azure and then create services or resources over there. Those things you should be aware of. So how exactly you do it? There are three different ways, mainly three different ways. That doesn't mean there is only three ways to do something in Azure, but one of them is Azure Portal. The most important of them is Azure Portal, and then there is something called as Azure CLI, and then there is Windows PowerShell. Okay, so what are the differences, how exactly we use it, when to use what, and all of that we can see now.
Okay guys, a quick info. If you're looking for an end-to-end training session in AZ104 in Azure, Intellipaat provides that course and those details are available in the description box below. Now let's continue with this session.
Okay, so we understood about the architecture of Azure, how exactly it looks like with respect to in the backend, the regions. First of all, the larger geographical area, the regions, then there in the availability zone concept, the data center, and then there within inside the data center, the server racks. On top of that, we have the server sitting, okay, the physical servers. So that we understood. Next thing, we did go to the different services that is available with respect to Azure. Which service with respect to compute, there are some services, for example, like function app, VMN, etc., and so on. Then in networking, certain services. Then in identity, sorry, in storage, you have certain services. Then in database, you have certain services, and it's not limited to that. There are again further so many services that is available with respect to Azure. Just to introduce you onto this, a few listing of the services has been given. Next, we go to something called as how we can interact with Azure. Okay, so we understood the scenarios. Now we understood what is Azure, we understood what is there in the infrastructure and so on. Now we have to know how do you interact with the Azure. So to interact with the Azure, there are three main ways. One is called as Azure Portal, one is called as Azure CLI, another one is called as Windows PowerShell. Don't say Windows PowerShell, but just say maybe we can say PowerShell. That also will be enough. Because PowerShell is not available for the Linux anyway. So no problem. Either way, even if you say Windows PowerShell, there is no issues with it. That is also correct only. So let's go and try to understand the first one of it, which is Azure Portal. So how do you go to the Azure Portal? You go to browser and then say portal.azure.com. Okay, you just type portal.azure.com. So when you give portal.azure.com, you will be taken to the Azure Portal. You will have to give your login credentials, obviously the user account and password that you used to sign up for the Azure. In my case, I have already logged in, and that's why it took me directly in. I didn't have to provide it again because I have kept that option, save the login option. So that is why. So once you log into the Azure Portal, this is what the page that you're going to see. The most recently used resources you will be able to see on top. Now, if you click on the left hand side, there are some portal menu. If you click on the portal menu, there you can see if you want to create a resource in Azure, you can go and say create resource, and then there is home button, dashboard, all services, then resource group, virtual machine, load balancers, storage account, all these different services. So whichever service if you wanted to go to, you can go click over them. All not resources, all services. If you go to all services, all the services offered by Microsoft, you will be able to see. You can simply say all on the left hand side, in which case you will be able to see all of them. You can see so many different services available from Azure. Okay, fair enough. Let's come back home. And now there is also a dashboard if you want to customize. Okay, if you wanted to add additional clock, or if you want to add monitoring data about the VM onto the dashboard, all of that can be done. You simply have to click on edit and specify what exactly that you want. Okay, for example, if you wanted to add a clock, you can say click on add and then specify the time zone and then save it. Okay, fair enough. So that's what happens with respect to the dashboard option. Let's come back home. And after the dashboard, now there is a search bar. The search bar is for the searching of entire Azure under your control, in the sense whatever the subscription that you have, within that subscription, any resources that you have, if you want to share, you can go and share over here. Sorry, look up over here. You can search for it. For example, if I wanted to search for the virtual machine service, I can simply type virtual machines and all that related will come up. I can select virtual machine and then go and deploy a VM if I want to. Fair enough. So that's all about the search bar, common functionality only. This option we will come back later, Cloud Shell. Apart from that, there is something called as a directory button, a directory plus subscription button. What is this directory plus subscription button? So that is where if you have multiple subscriptions, it is possible for one person to have multiple subscriptions of Azure. So if at all you have multiple subscriptions, then in that case, if you wanted to change from one subscription to another one, that has to be done from the directory plus subscription button. Very next to that, there is a notification button, wherein whenever you do something on Azure, a notification will be sent on to this. Then there is a settings bar. So on the settings bar, you can just modify the portal settings with respect to the background color, the contrast, and so on and so forth. If you want to change, you can change from here. Next to that, there is a support option. In the sense, if you click on the help button, if you scroll down, there is an option to generate a support ticket with Microsoft. And in case if you're facing issue with something, you can go ahead and get in touch with them by using this facility. Okay. Apart from that, there is a feedback button wherein you're good to provide any feedback that you want to. For example, if this functionality was good, that was bad, etc., etc. Any feedbacks can be submitted through this option. And then finally, you will see the account details, the account with which we have signed in onto this environment. That's it. Okay, so that's all about the Azure portal. Now in Azure portal, let me go ahead and show you how I can create something. In the sense, there is something called as a resource group. But let's see how I can create a resource group. For example, I'll come back home. I'll go to resource groups and I'll say I want to create a resource group. Okay, what exactly is a resource group? Resource group, for example, if you're working on a project, that particular project's related resources. Okay, whatever the resources that is there for that project, you can get all of them, including all the services that you have utilized. For example, if you have created a couple of VMs, you can create a resource group and place those resources onto this resource group, the virtual machine, storage account, any other resources. In Azure, whatever the resource that you create has to be made part of a resource group, and that is mandatory. So the same way, we are going to create a resource group. That's all, a simple resource group, no other resources, just to see if we can create it. Okay, so I specify the subscription where I want this to be created. I have to specify a name for the resource group. So I'll say RG1. Okay, then I'll specify the region. For example, I'll go with say South India. This is not so important. I'll make you understand later on, but still, it will ask for a location, no problem. I'll go give South India, click on next, and review plus create. Okay, in which case that particular resource group will be created. You can see the resource group is available for us. So this is how you do things from the Azure portal. Okay, this is just one example. I'll be okay, so we have seen the Azure portal. Now we have two more options remaining, which is nothing but Azure PowerShell and Azure CLI. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about CLI and Windows PowerShell or Azure PowerShell, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. So first of all, we go to CLI. But for the CLI, I have to introduce you onto something called as one we skipped over here called as a Cloud Shell. Okay, so I wanted to introduce you onto this Cloud Shell. But before that, let's go to this Cloud Shell option. Okay, so I told you this, there are two command line tools available. Now this command line tools can be initiated from a Azure portal itself. It is possible from a Azure portal itself. It is possible for me to call the command prompt, let it be the CLI and the PowerShell. Now, problem here is that whenever you are using Azure and you wanted to create something via the command line, and you decided I'll call the command line from here, from the Cloud Shell. And when you do so, it is asking you to create a storage. It is saying no storage mounted. What does that mean? The no storage mounted means for this bash to work or for this Cloud Shell to work, it requires access to a network drive. Okay, So that particular network drive, from where you will get it from a storage account. What is a storage account? A storage account is a place where we store the data in Azure cloud. In Azure cloud, if you wanted to store some data, then you use something called as a storage account, and inside that storage account you need a network drive, and that particular network drive will be used by the CLI as well as the PowerShell plus the CLI. Okay, so that is why it is saying when you try to open it up, it is saying, okay, there are no storage available, so you have to create a mount point, which means now I have to go ahead and create a storage account. From that storage account, they will provision a location, a network path, and that network path will be utilized by the what we call the cloud shell in order to process the files. When I say process the files, whatever the important files that are there, it has to be kept back. So that place to keep it back, that is what this file share is. Fair enough. So now what I do is I'll select my subscription and then I'll click on create storage. Okay, I'll ask them to create the storage. Whatever you want, you create it. I'm not doing anything. If you want to customize it, you do have an option. Click on show advanced option, and then therein you can customize it. But anyway, let it create, and then after that we will see. Let's give it a minute. So here, that's it. Now this is, you can see there are two bash are also called as CLI, and now the PowerShell. CLI and PowerShell. CLI is also called as the bash. Collectively together, here the option is called as cloud shell. A cloud shell. Fair enough. So we did create a resource group previously in the Azure portal. Okay. So the same way I want to create a resource group again with some CLI bash commands. So what I'll do is I'll say new space sorry, AZ resource group. Just a minute, I believe the command is slightly incorrect. AZ group create could be the command. Yes, AZ group create. Yes, hyphen name test rg1 hyphen anything else, a force. If you want to, you can give a force. If not, no problem as well. So AZ group create hyphen name test rg1. You have to specify the location hyphen the location, in which location the rg will be created. So I say South India. South India. I give enter. Okay, you can see AZ group create hyphen name test rg1 hyphen the location in South India. Provisioning stage succeeded. So which means such a resource group has been created. You can come back home, go to resource groups, and scroll down. In a short while that would pop up over here. Okay, in a short while. Just a second, guys. Okay, so let's see how you can do the same thing on the on-premises. So probably I believe you would have got some idea how you can create a resource group from a CLI now. So if you go to the resource group, you can see test rg1 was created. Okay, if you remember the command, AZ group create hyphen name test rg1 hyphen location South India. That's it. Let's switch to PowerShell now. From bash, I switch to PowerShell. Click on confirm. Then after that, in PowerShell, how we will do the same thing. Let's see how we will do create a resource group the same way. Okay, so here I would say, for example, new hyphen AZ resource group hyphen name test rg2, sorry, rg3. Already one name that is taken, we cannot use it. And new hyphen AZ resource group hyphen name test rg3 hyphen location. Okay, location, and then specify the location, and then give enter. And you can see that is also succeeded. A new resource group has been created with the name test rg3. If you were to refresh over here, you will be able to see that.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of Azure by answering this question. What are the different cloud deployment models? A. private cloud, B, public cloud, C, hybrid cloud, D, all of the above. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
And that's all about it. So the third resource group that we created, TestRG3, that is also available. So this was done via the PowerShell. Okay, that's all about it. So Azure portal, we have seen Azure CLI, we have seen Azure PowerShell option also we have seen, but we haven't seen it by keeping it on our local machine. In the sense, I wanted to set it up on this machine. In that case, what I have to do? Okay, what I'll do is I'll go to PowerShell on my machine. Windows PowerShell ISC, run as administrator. Now this PowerShell is Windows PowerShell. He don't know about Azure. Okay, when you open up a PowerShell, he don't know about Azure. So you have to make him understand about Azure first of all. The different commands that you have with respect to Azure, you have to teach him. So to teach this PowerShell about those commands, you have to install something called as a Azure module, PowerShell module. Azure PowerShell module has to be installed. Okay, once it is installed, you will be able to recognize whatever the commands that you give over here. Your PowerShell can recognize it. So what I'll do here is that first of all, I have to, for example, let me just open up the required files for that. 1 second. Okay, so here we go. So to install this AZ module, you have the command like install -module -namespace AZ allow global. So this particular command will install the AZ module on your machine. But before you go with that, there is a prerequisite check. You have to run a $PS version table. $PS version table. So when you do a $PS version table, the PS version, PowerShell version, if it is less than 5.1, 5.1, I wouldn't think a problem. But if it is obviously less than 5, then you will not be able to use it. Okay, you have to update it. Okay, that has to be kept in mind. How do you update the PowerShell? You go and download the PowerShell online and then get it installed. That's right. That's all about it. So now let's see. When I ran $PS version table, here it is 5.1. So no problem. I can just clear the screen. Next step is that you have to, in case if you wanted to see the modules that has been installed on this machine, you can run get-installed module, in which case you will be able to see all the modules that has been installed on your PowerShell environment. You can see AZ 3.7, AZ 4.3, AZ 5.5. Okay, different versions are installed. Now, specific version if you want to install, you can use install-module -name AZ, the required version, whatever it is. Then after that, it is really important you set up the execution policy. Execution policy is nothing but whenever we have or whenever we start doing this scripting on the machine, by default Windows don't have a nature. They will block the scripting. Any scripts that you try to execute, that will be blocked by default. So you have to change the execution policy for the scripts to work, and that is what we are doing from that command. We are changing the execution policy to either unrestricted or something like that. Let's see what does the command says. Yeah, remote signed. Set execution policy execution policy is remote signed. So run any script that is remotely signed. Okay, that is also fine. That's all what we are saying over here. And finally, you can import the module if you want to the Azure module. Then you say login -AZ account, or you say connect -AZ account. So this is a Windows local machine, but this machine doesn't know in Azure I do have account. Okay, he's just learning about the different Azure commands. That is enough. Now to know that there are so many accounts across the world, there are so many people who's using Azure. So how do you connect to your Azure account from this PowerShell window? That is where you have to use the login. So you give connect-AZ account, and when you do so, it will ask you for the username and password. And when you successfully give the username and password, you will be authenticated and you will be able to access the resources. So let's do that. First of all, let me run the command connect-AZ account. Connect-AZ account. And when I do so, a pop-up will come where it will ask me for the username and password. I'll select my account, give the password, and you can see it is currently logged in onto my environment. But this is also not enough. most of you would need to set up a context as well. Okay, so in the sense, if you have multiple subscription, especially on which subscription that you want to currently work on, that has to be specified. So which means in my case I have 2 subscription, so I have to set up a context first of all. So whatever the commands that I'm running over here is only relevant to this and this subscription. That is what I'm saying via the context. But right now when you do this, you can see account is there, but subscription name, yeah, one subscription is selected anyway. In my case, why it is showing as selected is because I've already logged in before, so that is why it is selected. In your case it will not be. What you have to do is you have to set up the context by saying set -az contact. But to set up the context, you need to provide the subscription ID. So how do you get the subscription ID? You have to give get-az subscription. Okay, so once you do that, you will be able to see the subscription whichever is you are having access to. For example, this is a subscription ID that he has access to, so I'll just copy the subscription ID and let's see what they can do. Okay, I'll just copy this. Oops, is it copied? One second, guys. Yeah, here we go. And then after that you come back to, where is it, command which I gave you, one second, set -az context. Yeah, here we go, set -az context on 25th line, subscription. Then after that you specify the subscription ID over here. Okay, and then run this, and you can see the subscription is selected now. Now if you wanted to go ahead and create a resource group, there is no problem, you should be able to. Let's change this from 3 to 4, and then let's run this and see what happens. You can see test RG4 new resource group was created. Okay, so this is the idea that we have with respect to creating resource and so on and so forth.
Azure is in the second position according to the public market share, that is the number of companies who are using it, number of services which are being used in Azure. So now one more thing about Azure is the current most, like it's having the most growth in this year, and even the last year it's even growing faster than Amazon Web Services. We all know Amazon Web Services was the one which started first in 2006. Azure came after 4 years in 2010, but still they are catching up. And right now there is a lot of job increase in Azure. And so this is not a fact I'm saying, and this is a statistic which Indeed.com has shown, that there is an 18% increase in jobs from last year to this year, but in AWS and Google Cloud, not much of an increase. And that's why we are going to start off with Azure. So first of all, Azure always invests because their parent company is Microsoft, and Microsoft completely owns Azure, and they invest in security and R&D. So every year you can see there are around at least 5 to 10 new services are introduced. You have already 100+ services to build and deploy, and you get a lot of free services capabilities as well. So the thing is, if you start off with Azure, you get a month of free services for a particular credit limit, and you can basically learn everything within that month. And then you also have Fortune 500, that is 95% of Fortune 500 companies use Azure for their business needs. So again, this is a statistic given by Forbes. So numbers obviously don't lie. That's why I wanted to put the statistics in the front and then start off with the session. Okay. So now when you start off with Azure, what do you get for free? So you get 12 months of services for free. Not all the services. There are a few services which are in certain limits, which you can use for free for up to 12 months. There are also 25+ services which are always free. And there is also one more thing, which is the credit. So if you're from India, you'll get 13,300 rupees of credits for 30 days, in which you can use this particular credit to use any Azure service which you want. You can use AI services, you can use the IoT Hub service, you can use any service you want, and you can use the credit limit of 13,300. If you're from USA or any other countries, the limit would be around $100, and it will vary across that $100. Okay, so these are the things for free. And also, this is one of the important things I want to ask for. That is the average salary of an Azure architect. So in USA, it's $100,000, and in the UK, it's 67,000 pounds, and in India, it's 17 LPA. So these are the average prices. These are not the minimum or maximum. So if you're a junior architect, or if you're a fresher in the domain, in that case you'll be getting a starting salary of around 6 to 8. So I'm not the apt person for talking about these. I'm just giving you a brief. My colleague will talk in depth about these. Okay, so now obviously at the end of the day we'll be asking for the salary, because once we complete a certification, or when we learn a particular technology, the end goal is to take up a job which pays us good salary. And then this was the fact which I told you before, that is 95% of Fortune 500 companies use Azure for their business. So it's not that their entire website is hosted on Azure. Not that case. You can use one particular service in Azure as well. Even that is considered as using Azure. So obviously Microsoft, Toyota, BMW, LinkedIn, Samsung, Xerox, Lufthansa, and Honeywell. So these are some of the top companies, top tier companies, which use Azure for their business and cloud needs. Okay. So why I gave this intro is because you need to know how big actually Azure is, and what are the companies which are using it, and how much you can get as a pay once you complete Azure. Now coming to the Azure certification, which most of you, some various certifications, and these are the main certifications which we provide, as these are the main certifications which are really popular and commonly taken. And obviously these three are the certifications which are highly paid. So now certification is optional. It is a fundamental certification which covers all the basic needs, all the theoretical part of Azure. You can understand what is so basically you can understand about all of these services in theory in the fundamental certification. So once you complete learning for fundamentals, you can take up the exam and you can give it. So basically you should know everything about Azure. Theoretically, you don't need to know it practically, because fundamentals does not need that. You just have to understand how it works, how a particular service works, where do you need this particular service, and all that. And then coming to Microsoft Certified Azure Administrator, and then there is Azure Developer. So as I told you, administrator's job is to monitor, and so it's basically administering the cloud system. And then the developer's job is to develop applications or develop solutions on the Azure cloud. So now to become Azure Administrator Associate, you'll have to finish this particular certification, and developer this particular certification. So there are various numbers, like there is 304, there is 104, like that. So that might cover, because they know better than me. Okay, so you can just you'll have to choose first. You'll have to choose between solutions architect or administrator or developer. So make your mind. So I cannot help you choose that. My colleague will help you choose that. After the session, you can contact as well. So there is no issues in that. Let's say you want to choose solutions architect. In that case, first you'll have to start preparing for it. You'll have to know what you'll have to learn for solutions architect. And the thing is, you can see you'll have to take up 2 exams for solutions architect to get the certification. And for administrator, I think there is only 1 exam. It varies across multiple certifications as well. You'll have to know everything about the certification before taking it up. So one more thing is, if you take up solutions architect, in that case you can become expert in it. So you can get an expert certificate. So once you get an expert certificate, basically you can just grow in the same domain. You can join as a cloud architect, then you can become a senior cloud architect, then you can become a team lead. So you can just grow your career according to that. Or if you take up administrator, take a developer, in that case you can just take up an Azure DevOps engineer expert. So we all know that DevOps is in adaptation. A lot of companies are trying to adapt into the DevOps methodology. So right now, if you're an administrator, you'll be in the operations region. If you're in the Azure developer region, you'll be in the development region. So you can learn the DevOps tools as well. So you already know Azure, learn DevOps, combine DevOps tools in Azure. Then the next logical step, once you complete administrator and develop, be certified for administrator, or you should be certified for developer. Okay, so these are the logical steps. These are the steps which you can take up. So you take up architect, administrator, developer. So if you have any doubts regarding these, if you have any doubts of like choosing between them as well, keep those doubts right now. You can contact us later, or you can just raise a question at the end of the session, and you can basically get a solution for that. Okay, now, so I've almost come to the end. So these are the 3 certifications which are the main certifications which you can take up. Now coming down, okay, so it's basically the same thing. So you can start off by reading or by watching tutorials. So we have both. We have the blogs and we have the YouTube channel. in which we give free content, in which we give free tutorials. You can check out our YouTube channel, which is the same name as our company's name, Intellipaat. You can check it out. There are some 10 hours and 11 hours courses with also added hands-ons and projects. You can start learning from that. And you can also go ahead and start reading the Intellipaat blog, in which we have Azure tutorials, and you can understand all the basics about Azure. Okay. Let's look into what is Azure Cloud Service. So, what is Azure Cloud Service? Microsoft Azure is an ever expanding set of cloud services to help your organization meet your business challenges. Azure offers services on a pay-as-you-go pricing model in computing, web services, data storage, analytics, etc. etc. So there are so many different domains in which Azure is providing services. So to be very simple, Azure is a cloud provider, a public cloud provider, as well as you can get private cloud services and hybrid cloud services from them. So first of all, Azure is Microsoft owned. Azure is a cloud provider. So after AWS, Azure is the most popular cloud service in the world. So when an interview asks this, you can be basic as well as advanced. I would suggest you just give the apt answer what exactly it is. Microsoft Azure is a cloud service which provides you various different services in various domains like computing, web services, data storage, and you can access those services via an internet device. So you can access them through a laptop or a desktop or your mobile device, anything with an internet connectivity. You will be able to access Microsoft Azure. Okay, so we've seen what is Azure Cloud Service. Okay guys, now let's look into the second question, which is how does Azure compare with AWS? So first of all, AWS owns 32.3% of the market share in the public cloud industry, but Azure owns only 16.2%, which is just half of what AWS owns. But Azure is currently the fastest growing cloud network, and also it has 54 different regions in which it has availability zones, but AWS has 69 availability zones across only 24 regions. So regions in the sense are geographically located regions. For example, Azure has regions like South India, North India, East US, West US, Central US, Europe, Central Europe. So there are so many different regions like that. So like that, there are 24 different regions, but within those regions, AWS has 69 availability zones. But Azure has 54 regions. In 54 regions, it has 54 availability zones, and it's currently growing. So this basically shows Azure is better in availability zones, that is data centers, because it has a wide range of data centers in various regions. Next, comparing the services, if you already know about cloud, AWS and Azure, then this would be easy. EC2, S3, RDS are AWS services. The same exact service, EC2 is equal to virtual machine, Azure virtual machines. S3 is equal to storage, blob storage. RDS is equal to SQL databases in Azure. So EC2 is used to launch and create servers, same as VM does. And then S3 and blob storage are for storing objects. RDS and SQL databases can create relational databases running on the cloud. So you can distinguish between different services. And then finally, the pay per hour model and pay per minute model. So this is one of the important difference you'll have to note down, because AWS does not have a pay per minute model yet. It charges you for the hour which you used, but Azure will charge you only for the minute. For example, if you're running a service, let's say you are running the same server, Linux server, in AWS and Azure for 5 minutes. In AWS, you will be charged the hour. For example, if the hour charged in both AWS and Azure is $5, so it would be $5 for 60 minutes. If it's $5, so you will be charged for the whole $5 in AWS, but in Azure that would be not the same, because you will be charged per minute. So if it is $5 for the hour, that is 60 minutes, so that will be reduced to 1 minute, so that would be multiplied into 5. So you will be charged very less in Azure compared to AWS if you are using services for a very less period of time. So if you're using some service for 10-15 minutes, then go with Azure, because that will not charge you as much as AWS. Okay, so we've seen the second question. So I think you can coagulate into an answer and give it. I'm just explaining you the differences, but you'll have to provide it more of a answer. And then comes the roles implemented in Microsoft Azure. So there are three main roles: the web role, the worker role, and the virtual machine role. First, the web role. This gives a web solution, that is the front end. This is like an ASP.NET application, while under facilitating, Azure provides IIS, which is basically a web server, and required services. So web role provides a web solution. Basically, it's a front end. It can be a website's front end. The worker role is a solution for background service. It can run long activities. For example, if you have a log activity, if you want to monitor the log activity, you can use a worker role. And then finally, a virtual machine role. So this can act both as a web and a worker role, and this is only contradicts to the website, the front end. Worker role only contradicts to the business logic, which is the background or the back end part. So in virtual machines, you can run both a web role and a worker role, which means you can have a website running as well as a background process running. So these are the three main roles which are implemented in Microsoft Azure. So I think you get the point of this. So basically in Azure, mostly it is used to launch applications. So for an application, obviously there will be a web role, which would be the application itself hosted, and then the worker role, which is background processes. For example, if a person wants to retrieve an image from the website, so they'll enter the information, click a button, and a background code will run. So that code would be your worker role, and these both can be run on a virtual machine, which makes it a virtual machine role. So these are the three most basic roles. And the next question is, so this might be a question which may be asked, but this does not have a certain answer. I'm just giving you the three most popular and commonly used services. So talk about the three principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform. Okay, so first of all, compute and storage comes by default because they are the most used. Compute services and storage services are the most used services in any cloud platform, and then you can choose one as per your need. For example, you can choose databases, or you can choose monitoring, managing, governance. You can choose anything. So here I've chosen databases. For example, you can tell the answer like this. So the principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform it can be basically anything, but here the most commonly used services comes under the compute and storage platform. And I also would say databases, because every single application needs a compute, needs storage, and also database. So for example, in compute there is virtual machines, app services, and function apps, which can be used to develop an application and also host that application with the backend code. And then there is Microsoft Azure Storage, where we have blob storage, table storage, where we have file storage, we have Azure Queues. So we can use all of them to store objects. We can use them to store images, videos, audio files. We can use them to store NoSQL data. And finally comes databases, where we can store, record, or structure information. And also there is a Cosmos DB, which is for NoSQL. And also if your application needs a analytical database, we have SQL data warehouses for that purpose too. So compute, storage, and databases, I would say they are the three principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform, because they provide so many different services. Pretty sure even Azure uses them for their own benefit. Okay, so this is the fourth question. So we have seen 4 questions up till now. So the fifth question is, what is the distinction between Azure queues and Azure service bus queues? Okay, first of all, storage queues and service bus queues are different. So first, what are storage queues? Storage queues featuring a simple REST-based get, put, peek interface, providing reliable, persistent messaging system within and between services. Service bus queues are part of a broader Azure messaging infrastructure that supports queuing as well as publish or subscribe and more advanced integration patterns. Okay, so the simplest thing you'll have to know is, if your application needs to store more than 80 GB of messages, go with storage queues. But if it needs only lesser than that and it won't exceed 80 GB, you can go with a service bus queue. So the thing is, storage queues are mainly used to move messages between services or to an end user. So you can see it is a REST based get, put, peek interface. Basically, you can get a message from it, you can upload or send a message through it, And in Service Bus, you can do the same, but also you can integrate advanced patterns. For example, you can integrate a queuing system which basically filters multiple messages according to their priority, and that does not come with storage queues. Also, storage queues are very easy to use. You can use it between services. You can create a queue within minutes. Service Bus has a broader usage in Azure itself. So these are the main two differences, that if you want to use an application for your own personal use, go with storage queues. If it is a bigger application which needs shorter message storing, go with Service Bus queues. So the main distinction between them is storage queues are simple, REST-based get put peak interface, but Service Bus queues is involved with the Azure messaging infrastructure itself, and this supports queuing as well as normal publish and subscribe, which comes with storage queues as well. Also, you can integrate advanced integration patterns, but which cannot be done in storage queues, where you can filter different messages according to their priority and various other features and factors. Okay, so the next question is, what is stable storage in Microsoft Azure? So Azure Table Storage Service stores a lot of organized information. Azure Tables are perfect for putting away organized non-relational data. It is a NoSQL data store which acknowledges verified calls from inside and outside the Azure cloud. So basically, table storage is a NoSQL data store where you can store non-relational data. That's basically NoSQL, non-relational database. Okay, so now what exactly is table storage? First, let's look into what exactly it is. First of all, a table is a collection of entities. A record can contain numerous tables. Basically, when you create a table, you can have multiple tables or a single table, and it is a collection of entities. So what are entities? Entities is an arrangement of properties like a database row. An entity can be up to 1 MB in size. So basically, an entity is an item within the table. For example, if it is a table for shoes, and inside that every single shoe name would be a entity. Next comes properties. A property is a name value pair. Every entity can incorporate up to 252 properties to store data. For example, let's say in entity we have 3 different shoe types. One is Adidas, one is Reebok, one is Nike, and inside Adidas you can have 252 properties like color, type, shoe model number, and so many different properties under that entity which defines that particular entity. So inside a table there can be any number of entities, and inside those entities there can be 252 different types of properties to store data. So that's what Azure Table Storage is used for. It is a service used to store a lot of organized information in which you can store non-relational data. It is a NoSQL data store which acknowledges verified calls from inside and outside the Azure cloud. That is, you can integrate it with Azure services inside the cloud as well as third-party services from outside the cloud. And table is a collection of entities. Entities is basically the main item inside a table, and properties are the basically a property explains what an entity is, and the entities completely explain what a table is. So that's it. That is what table storage is. The next question is, what is auto scaling in Azure? So what is auto scaling in Azure? Scaling by including extra instances is frequently referred to as scaling out. So this is a commonly used term which is called scaling out. So Azure likewise supports scaling up by utilizing bigger role rather than more role instances. An auto scaling solution reduces the amount of manual work engaged in dynamically scaling an application. So this is pretty simple, guys. So let's say you have a virtual machine which has let's say it has a website running on it. Now there are a lot of users using it right now, but that one particular virtual machine is able to handle them. So let's say there are 20 users. Now right now this particular virtual machine is able to handle all the 20 users and the website is not crashing. But suddenly your website has gone viral and there are 200 users. Now your virtual machine will not be able to handle because there are more users and the CPU utilization will go high. The traffic, the overload of your server will go high. Because of that, the usage also will increase and then your website might crash. So what you'll have to do, you'll have to again start up a virtual machine or another server. Once you have done that, you will have to configure your website and make it run again. So this will take some time. Until then, you would have lost a lot of users. So instead, you can start off with using auto scaling. So for example, you can see the image in the right corner below, in which to the left there are two virtual machines, which is written as minimum 2. That basically means, let's say you have a website, and right now your website has two virtual machines, and that is the minimum number of virtual machines, and it will never go below that. Even a virtual machine is let's say even a virtual machine has been terminated accidentally, it will launch one more virtual machine within a span of a minute, and that will be ready for your website. So now to the right side, you can see virtual machines as needed, and maximum is equal to 5. So the maximum number of virtual machines you will get is 5. The minimum number of virtual machines running will be 2. And there you can add or subtract 3 virtual machines. For example, if you have 2 virtual machines right now, you can add 3 more or 2 more or 1 more, or you don't need to add at all. But you cannot go below number 2, or you cannot go above number 5. You can use auto scaling solution to do this. For example, right now you have 2 virtual machines and the work overload goes very high. So right now you want 1 virtual machine, so it will launch 1 virtual machine. Now it will monitor all of the 3 virtual machines.
Okay guys, a quick info: if you're looking for an end-to-end training session in AZ104 in Azure, Intellipaat provides that course, and those details are available in the description box below. Now let's continue with this session.
Again, if the user count is completely increasing, it will launch 1 more, and again if the users are increasing the traffic.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of Azure by answering this question. Which of the following web applications can be deployed with Azure? A. ASP.NET, B. PHP, C. WCF, D. All of the above. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
Is overloading, then again it will launch 1 more virtual machine. So here the maximum is number 5, so it will launch up to 5 virtual machines. After that, even though the user base is increasing, it won't go above that. You'll have to change that in the configuration. For example, max is equal to 10, so it can launch up to 10 different virtual machines. Okay, so got it? So I think you understood what exactly auto scaling is. So you can explain it simply. For example, you can tell auto scaling solution reduces the manual work engaged in dynamically scaling an application. Instead, we can set up an auto scaling solution in Azure where it gives you the number of required instances, as such as whenever the traffic increases, it will give you more instances. When the traffic decreases, it will reduce the number of resources being used, which is also cost optimized, and this will reduce your billing cost. So now let's look into the next question, which would be, what are the features of Microsoft Azure? So what are the features of Microsoft Azure? So there are so many different features. So let's just look into 3 features. So first, Azure App Services enables designers to assemble the sites utilizing various different programming languages. You can use ASP.NET, PHP, you can use Java, Python, and send these websites utilizing FTP or Git. Basically, you can use GitHub to have this code, and you can integrate it with Azure App Services, so that Azure itself will launch your website for you. It will maintain your website for you. You just have to work on your code. Next comes SQL databases, formerly known as Azure Database, broadens and scales the application into the cloud utilizing Microsoft SQL Server. So in SQL databases provided by Azure, you don't need to scale out anything. For example, if you have set up a maximum size, whenever the size of the database increases, it will automatically scale the storage, and also you can manually scale the compute. And finally, this is Microsoft's platform as a service that supports multi-level applications and automated deployment. That is, Azure is Microsoft's platform as a service because they are giving you a platform to work on various different services. Even though services like virtual machines are infrastructure as a service, it comes under IaaS, but Microsoft Azure as a whole is a platform as a service because they are giving you a platform which you can work on different cloud services. So these are some features about Microsoft Azure. You can talk about them. So next question is, what are the difference between a public cloud and a private cloud? This is one of the most basic questions. You can easily answer them. So Look at the image at the top. So first of all, public cloud, elasticity, utility pricing, leverage, expertise. And then private cloud, total control, regulation, flexibility. So let's compare this. First of all, elasticity, that is, you can launch any number of services, it can go up, it can go down, you can have any number of users, you can provide the access to users, you can cut off the access whenever you want. So it's more elastic. And then coming to right, it's total control. You can mention the administrator and only they will have control over the private cloud. So this basically increases security in private cloud, but public cloud is widely used. And also you can see leverage expertise. That means if you're using Microsoft Azure as a public cloud, then you will be able to leverage expertise because they have so many different security professionals working for Microsoft, and they will be guarding your virtual machines because you have taken a virtual machine from Azure itself. And coming to private cloud, you'll have to maintain, monitor all of that. And then comes utility pricing and regulation. So utility pricing in the sense you only pay for what you use. In private cloud, you will pay for everything you have taken up. And also regulation in the sense you can stop someone to access something. You can stop a service overall. You don't need to use a service. So in private cloud, you have the whole control. In public cloud, you have partial control. Okay, so now let's look into the most basics of them. A public cloud is utilized as a service through the internet by users, so anyone can use it, while a private cloud is deployed within specific limits like firewall settings and is totally overseen and checked by users dealing with it in an organization. So a public cloud is used for launching applications for public use, that is end user use. Private cloud is mostly used for deploying applications within a specified limit. For example, within an organization, you can launch applications. So you can do that using private cloud. So this is the basic differences between public and private cloud. So the next question would be hybrid cloud. What do you comprehend about hybrid cloud? So basically a company can use both public and private cloud. So a combination of them is a hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud is a blend of internal and external cloud services. So internal in the sense within the organization, external in the sense for users, a mix of private cloud joined with the utilization of public cloud services. This kind of cloud is most appropriate when you need to keep the classified information at your vicinity, private cloud, and consume alternate services from a public cloud. For example, if you have mission critical data, you can store that in the private cloud, and the application itself can be running on the public cloud because the application does not have any important information, and even though there is a security breach, there can be nothing taken from that, but your mission critical data and code is stored in a private cloud which only you can access. So this is hybrid cloud. And the next question is, what is a storage key? So your storage key access keys are similar to a root password for your storage account. Always be careful to protect your access keys. Use Azure Key Vault to manage and rotate your keys securely. You can view and copy your account access keys with the Azure portal, PowerShell, or Azure CLI. The Azure portal also provides a connection string for your storage account that you can copy. For example, if you're logging into your storage account in Azure portal, it's pretty simple to log in. You can just enter as such. But if you're trying to access your storage account from PowerShell or Azure CLI, you will have to use your storage keys. So it's basically an entry point for your storage account. So you can use that. Also, Azure portal provides a connection string for your storage account that you can copy and use it in your Azure CLI or PowerShell. So to be simple, it is similar to a root password for your storage account, and it is a key which you can use to log into your storage account to check out the storage containers like blob storage, table storage within the storage account itself. So it's pretty simple, storage account. And then comes, what is Microsoft Azure Traffic Manager? So it enables users to control the distribution of user traffic of installed Azure cloud services. There are 3 distinctive load balancing strategies provided by Azure. The manager who uses on traffic applies a routing policy to the domain name servers, questions on your domain names, and maps the DNS courses to the apt instances of your application. So let me explain to you in simple words. So first of all, Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS based traffic load balancer that enables you to distribute traffic optimally to services across global Azure regions while providing high availability and responsiveness. So basically, Traffic Manager uses a DNS to direct client requests to the most appropriate endpoint on traffic routing method. So basically, let me explain to you this. So let's say you are trying to access a website using a website's URL name. Now, when you type that, your first point of entry would be the Traffic Manager. So once you hit that, the Traffic Manager will use DNS and it will check to which IP address should this particular URL name is should be redirected. So when it finds that, it will redirect the client request to the most appropriate service. For example, in Intellipaat.com, we have Intellipaat.com, which is the main page, and Intellipaat.com/blog. So for example, I'm searching for Intellipaat.com/blog. Now this will go to the Traffic Manager. Once it hits the Traffic Manager, it will check out the IP address for this particular URL. Once it gets the IP addresses, it will transfer me to the blog page, not the main Intellipaat.com page. So that's what Traffic Manager does, and it's pretty simple to use it. So you can start off with Traffic Manager even now. So you can combine Traffic Manager with auto scaling so that it is better to use. So if you're using Traffic Manager with auto scaling, basically what you do, you will be able to launch and terminate multiple virtual machines, as well as you'll be able to launch multiple applications in different virtual machines and connect two auto scaling groups together, in which the Traffic Manager is the first entry point. And for example, in one auto scaling group there is app 1, in another auto scaling group there is app 2. So now it hits the Traffic Manager. If you're trying to access app 2, it will take you to app 2. If you're trying to access app 1, it will take you to the app 1 auto scaling group. So this is how you can use Traffic Manager. The next question is, what is Microsoft Azure Portal? This is again a basic question. So Microsoft Azure Portal is the website which you are logging into when you're using Azure. So view and manage all of your applications in one unified hub. You can view your web applications, your databases, your virtual machines, your network, storage, and VST projects. Now it is easy to keep tabs on current and projected costs. So Microsoft Azure is not just for managing all your applications and services. It can also be used to manage your current and projected billing costs. So Azure Portal automatically calculates your existing charges, as well as it will forecast your future or monthly charge, even if you're managing hundreds of resources across several applications. For example, if you're using only one service, still it will give you the billed amount for right now and also the projected bill. If you're also using hundreds of services, again, it will do the same thing for you regardless of the scale. So Microsoft Azure Portal is the website which you're using to access Microsoft Azure services. That is more than enough. If you want to tell more, you can tell it's a unified hub to manage all the Azure services. It also provides cost management services. You can say it has a different web page for every single service. You can access every single service directly from the portal itself, and also manage, monitor, and do everything else through Azure Portal itself. And also you can access Azure Portal from any internet connected device. Okay, so we've seen that. The next question is, what is Elastic Pool in SQL Azure? So we already saw what exactly is an SQL database. So now Azure SQL Database Elastic Pools are a simple, cost-effective solution for managing and scaling multiple databases that have varying and unpredictable usage demands. Databases in an Elastic Pool are on a single server and share a set of resources at a set price. Okay, let me make it simple for you. So right now you want various databases for different applications, and all these databases need to have a different set of specifications. Now what you can do is you can launch an Elastic Pool, which is basically a single server with different sets of resources within it. You can launch multiple databases, and you can specify the required set of resources for a particular database within the Elastic Pool itself. You can launch any number of databases within that server and how much that server can handle, and all of the databases is shared, will use shared resources, and the price for that will be the same even though you're using any number of databases. So let's say you can have 10 databases within that elastic pool, or you can have 5 databases, or you can have only one database, but you'll be charged the same because you are sharing the same number of resources across all the databases. So this is elastic pool. Next is, what is your SQL database? So an SQL database is just an approach to get associated with cloud services where you can store your database into the cloud. If you already know about SQL databases, for example, MySQL, PostgreSQL or MS SQL database, you will understand this easily because it is basically the same relational database on your local system hosted on a cloud system and given remote access to you. So you can tell it pretty simply. SQL Azure database is a database server running in the Azure data center and to which you are given remote access to so that you can access that SQL database. Microsoft SQL Azure has a similar component of SQL Server, that is, it provides high accessibility, versatility and security in the core. Microsoft Azure SQL database has an element, it makes backups of each active database automatically. So this feature does not come with a local database because it does not take backup. It has only one storage where the data is actually stored, and if that is lost, your data is lost. But in Microsoft Azure SQL databases, it's not the case. You can enable automatic database backups. So if your database is active and new data is coming in, it will automatically back it up. So even though your database has been terminated, you can use the backup to launch a database with the same existing data set. So this is Azure SQL databases. Now let's look into the next question, which is, what are the different types of storage areas in Microsoft Azure? So there is blobs, there is table storage, there is queues, and there are still more, but you can talk about 3 maximum. So there is also file storage, which is basically a shared access file storage. So you can also talk about that if you want. But right now we'll be looking into blob, table and queues. So queues we already looked into. Now we'll just look into blobs and tables. Even table storage was a separate question, so you can also answer that. So first of all, what is blob? So blob is the most commonly used storage type in Azure. So the full form of blob would be binary large objects. So you can see that BLOB, which is basically binary large objects, blobs. So blobs are a component for storing a lot of content or binary data. You can store pictures, audio, visual documents, you can store video, you can store any type of data. They can scale up to 200 terabytes and can be acquired by utilizing REST APIs. Very simple to start off with blob storage. You can create a storage account and create a blob container in which you can upload images, videos, documents, anything you want. You can store any type of binary data within blob storage. So that is one of the main area in Microsoft Azure. Next comes table storage, which is a non-relational data store where you can store organized information, and also you can store them using a format which is table, entity, and within entity you can have properties. So that we saw. Next is queue. The sole target of a queue is to empower communication among the web and worker role instances. They help in storing messages that may be accessed by a customer. So as told, queues can be used to connect multiple services as well as services with the end user. So these are the 3 main storage areas. One more is a file storage, which is basically a shared storage access which you can use to connect the same storage to multiple virtual machines. So every single user in every single virtual machine will be able to access the same data store, which will save you a lot of storage as well as cost. Next question is, what is the concept of blob storage? I explained to you what exactly is blob. So let me just go into that more. So blob, as told again, it is binary large objects and includes text files, images, audios, and videos. Azure Blob is a service that stores massive unstructured data that can be accessed from any place via protocols like HTTP or HTTPS. So how does this work? How can you access these objects using HTTP or HTTPS? So it's pretty simple. Whenever you upload an object like image or audio into the blob storage, it will have a URL. So it will be provided a URL and you can use that URL to access that particular object. For example, if I'm uploading an image, that image will have a URL for that image itself. Now you can use that URL to access that particular image. So how will you access that? Using protocols like HTTP or HTTPS. So now what else you can use Azure Blobs for? Storing data for disaster recovery, backup and archiving, also storing files for shared access. Shared access in the sense, if you upload an object and you have a link for it, you can share that link with multiple users so that they all can use that particular blob storage as a shared storage. So that can happen. Also, you can use it for disaster recovery, that is, you can store data in different regions in blob storage itself and use it for backup and then also archiving data. So this is blob storage. Now let's look into the next question. So now this question is, what is Azure DevOps in Microsoft Azure? So if you are already familiar with DevOps methodologies, then this would be easier to understand. If you're not, I'll explain to you what exactly is DevOps in a few sentences. So first of all, DevOps is not a tool. It is a methodology which companies follow and implement in their software development lifecycle to automate the entire lifecycle. So Azure DevOps is not a methodology, it is a service. You may be confused by the name, but DevOps is the methodology, but Azure DevOps is a DevOps service provided by Azure and it is developed by the Microsoft team. It was previously called as VSTS or Visual Studio Team Services. Azure DevOps provides easy automation by having predefined build options for the deployment of applications. For example, if you're trying to launch an Angular application, it already has build options for it. It has npm packages in build. You can have a build. You can basically create a build in a matter of minutes. For example, if you're also launching a Java application, it has a Maven build option. You can use that to build that application. So that's why they are saying it provides you easy automation and also predefined build options. And finally, it also monitors your tools and it uses monitoring tools to monitor your application or your project which you have launched within Microsoft Azure DevOps. Okay, so Azure DevOps has various different tools. So let me explain to you those tools. So one tool is Azure Repos, which is a repository like GitHub. So it's pretty similar, it's basically the same. And then comes Azure Pipelines. Pipelines is the tool which you use to implement a CI/CD pipeline. A CI/CD pipeline is the one which you use to automate the software lifecycle. And then comes test plans, which is basically used to test the application. And then comes Azure boards, which is a Kanban board, which is basically like Jira, where you can implement work items, you can implement sprints. And then finally you have Azure artifacts, where you can store the packages like npm NuGet in the same place so that it is easier to access them. Also finally you get an Azure dashboard where you can access and also create and launch widgets which will be helpful for your application. For example, you can see how many builds have been succeeded, how many have failed, how much time it is taking to build a particular project, how many times it has been deployed, and how many users are using our application right now. So all these widgets can be used in Azure DevOps. So you've seen that. The next question is, what is Azure App Service? We already discussed this, but still I'll explain it to you once again. So to be very simple, Azure App Service is a completely managed service provided by Microsoft Azure. So within Azure, Azure App Service is a completely managed platform as a service, not infrastructure as a service, but a PaaS. It is a PaaS offering for proficient developers that conveys a rich arrangement of abilities to web, mobile, and integration services. So if a developer wants to just concentrate on the code which he is developing and doesn't want to manage the servers and the other side of it, that is the backend part of it, so what he can do, he can opt for a Azure App Service where he can launch one and he can just upload his code into Azure App Service, which will take care of provisioning servers, uploading the code within the server, and also serving that website, and also provide you an URL which you can use to look into the website. So you can do all of this using Azure App Service and you don't need to manage anything. Azure will manage everything for you. It will, as told, it will launch servers. It will also monitor and manage them for you. And if you want anything else, if you want to scale it up, again, you have an option for that. If you want to look into the server which it has launched, again, you have a shell option for that. Mobile applications in Azure App Service offer a very adaptable, universally accessible mobile application development platform for enterprise developers and system integrators that conveys a rich set of capacities to mobile engineers. So basically, using Azure App Services, you can not just launch websites, you can also launch mobile applications, and they are very adaptable and universally accessible mobile application development platform. For example, you might be using Android Studio or Xcode. So in this, you will be able to launch both of them and they will run successfully. So next we'll look into CMD let in Azure. So it's a pretty simple answer. So CMD let is a command, basically it's a PowerShell command, and this is utilized as a part of the PowerShell environment. So CMD lets, command lets are summoned by the Windows PowerShell to automate the scripts which are in the command line. For example, you have created a script, now you want to automate the script, you can go with command let. Windows PowerShell runtime additionally invokes them automatically through Windows PowerShell APIs. You can also automate CMD let commands which will automate other scripts using PowerShell APIs. So to be pretty simple, CMD let is a lightweight command which you can use in the PowerShell environment, and it is used to automate scripts. For example, if you want to launch virtual machine at a particular time, or if you want to monitor a virtual machine at 5 p.m. in the evening every single day, you can launch that script and you can automate it using CMD let, and it will run that script every day at 5 p.m. Okay, so the next one is Microsoft Azure Scheduler. So Azure Scheduler enables you to invoke activities, for example, calling HTTPS endpoints or presenting a message on a storage queue on any schedule. With Scheduler, you make jobs in the cloud that dependably call services both inside and outside of Azure and execute jobs on demand on a routinely repeating schedule or assign them for a future date. So in the name itself, you can understand Microsoft Azure Scheduler. So it basically schedules certain things for you. But what does it schedule? It schedules jobs on the cloud. So it can be within Azure or outside of Azure, and as mentioned, it will execute those jobs on demand, and it can be done on a repeating scale, that is, for example, every day or every week, or you can assign them for a future date to run only once. So that you can do using Microsoft Azure Scheduler. For example, it can call an HTTPS endpoints, or it can present a message on a storage queue on any schedule. So you can use the scheduler for any service on Azure or outside of Azure. So it's pretty simple. It is explainable by name itself. So to be simpler, you can tell this Microsoft Azure Scheduler is a service which you can use to schedule a certain task in Microsoft Azure or outside of Microsoft Azure to execute a job on demand, which can be executed repeatedly, or it can be set to a future date for execution only once. So the next question is, how can you create an HD Insight cluster in Azure? So let me explain it to you in a very simple way. So you can tell this because this is an interview, you will be asked questions, you will be able to answer them with words. So to make an HD Insight cluster, first of all, you'll have to open Azure portal, then click on new, you can select data services and you can click on HD Insight, or you can just search HD Insight and get into it. So once you get into it, you will have multiple options. You will have Hadoop, you will have HBase and Storm, and more options as well. So Hadoop is the default and native execution of Apache Hadoop, and HD Insight provides you Hadoop as the default option. And then comes HBase, which is an Apache open source NoSQL database based on Hadoop that gives random access and solid consistency for a lot of unstructured data. Storm, as such, it is a distributed fault-tolerant open source computation system that enables you to process data in real time. So the thing is, I'm not going to explain Hadoop, HBase and Storm right now. I'm just going to explain to you what is HD Insight. So HD Insight is an analytics service which you can use to launch Hadoop on the Azure cloud or other Hadoop ecosystem services like HBase, Storm or Spark on Azure cloud. So to launch HD Insights, it's pretty simple, but to work with it, it is a little tough. So to launch HT Insight, you'll just have to go to the HT Insight cluster, and you can choose the service which you want and you can launch it. So HT Insight, again, it's an analytics service, and you can launch the big data or analytics service which you want from it. Next question is, what is Text Analytics API in Azure Mission? So let me put it simply. First of all, Text Analytics APIs comes under cognitive services. So API, the application program interface. So this particular API is for text analytics, which can be used to search a particular word, or it can be used for keyword mining. Okay, now let us just read this once. The API can be used or utilized to analyze unstructured content for tasks such as sentiment analysis and key phrase extraction. Sentiment analysis, in the sense, let's say you have a complete page of content. Now you want to see the sentiment of that content, whether the statement is happy or sad or neutral. So you can check out that using various keys, and you can enter those words into the API so that when it runs, it will check whether it is positive or negative. So you can see it has a numeric score between 0 and 1, and when it comes near 1, it is highly positive, and when it comes near 0, it is highly negative sentiment. So that you can see. This is for sentiment analysis. And key phrase extraction, in the sense, if you have a very huge document and if you want to check whether this particular key phrase comes inside it, and you can use the Text Analytics API to check out the entire document. The upside of this API is that another new model need not be planned and prepared. The user just needs to bring the data and call the service to get the sentiment results. So they are telling that the best part of this API is that you don't need to call another service to run this API. Instead, you just have to bring the data set and call this API to run on the data set and get the sentiment results immediately. So I think you got it. It is a Text Analytics API, mainly used for tasks like sentiment analysis and key phrase extraction. You have two numeric scores, 0 and 1. Near 0 it is negative, and near 1 it is highly positive. It's basically sentiment, and the upside is you don't need to call any other service. You can directly call this API and upload a dataset, and it will give you the sentiment results.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of Azure by answering this question. What are the different cloud deployment models? A. Private cloud. B. Public cloud. C. Hybrid cloud. D. All of the above. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
Next question is, what is migrate tool? So again, in the name itself, you can get this answer: migration, a migration from the on-premise setup to the cloud, or from the cloud to the on-premise setup. This is a central hub of tools to discover, access, and migrate workloads to Azure. So you can migrate any type of workload into Azure. So it provides support for key migration scenarios across servers, data, databases, web applications, and virtual desktops. It saves costs and migrate efficiently with free tooling and Azure cost optimization. So you can use the Azure Migrate tool to migrate databases or servers or web applications from your on-premise setup to the Azure cloud seamlessly. So for example, if you want to migrate your database, you will have to provide the details like the endpoint, then you'll have to provide the username and password, and then the destination would be a Azure database. You can provide the details of the Azure database, and once you click start, it will migrate the data from the on-premise database into the Azure database, and it's very simple to start with. So this is basically Azure Migrate tool. You can easily explain this with 2 or 3 sentences. And we've come to the final question, which is, what is Azure Service Level Agreement? First of all, the SLA ensures that when you send 2 or more role instances for each role, access to your cloud service will be maintained not less than 99.9% of the time. Additionally, identification and recorrection activities will be started 99.9% of the time when a role's instance procedure isn't running. So let me explain to you SLA in simple words. It's an agreement in which Azure tells you that this particular service will be running for this amount of time. So for example, if you are using a service for 10 minutes, Azure provides you a SLA stating that your application will run 99.9% of the time in that 10-minute period. So your application can go down only for a 0.01%. That's very, very less. So like that, Azure will provide you. If you're using a free trial service, they don't mention an SLA because it's your free trial and they don't give you any benefit for you. But if you have a paid Azure account, if you're paying every single month, they will provide you an SLA for every single service, which will mention that this particular service will run for this amount of time. So for storage, it's basically high. For example, it would be 99.9999% of the time. It will be always up. It will never go down. So SLA is a statement which tells you this particular service will stay up for this amount of time and it will not go down. For example, if you're using it for 1 hour, it will stay up for 99% of the time and it may go for 1% of the time. It's not that it will go, it may go. So this is Azure SLAs. So we've come to the last question of this session, guys. I hope you understood all of the questions which we've taught.
Okay guys, a quick info: if you're looking for an end-to-end training session in AZ 104 in Azure, Intellipaat provides that course and those details are available in the description box below.
Okay guys, that's it for this particular session. So I hope this session was helpful and informative for you. If you have any queries, leave a comment down below and we'll love to help you out. Thank you.